of Isaiah. I want to bring this message tonight to an end, but dealing with it from the standpoint how the spiritual Jew tonight looks at the promises of God with hope, with confidence that somewhere in his future, God is going to move on the scene, change the tide of everything, and establish them as a nation of people like it was in ancient times. And it does seem strange that the leaders of Israel and the leaders of the United States have seemed like the same modernistic view. They want the history of the past to be changed. They want to be able to convince both elements of people. Times have changed. We've got to change with it. Politicians, educators, and all have absolutely a modern philosophy of the future. And as I listen to different ones in their comments and things, by just the natural things they would say, whether it's on TV or you read it through a paper, I have to feel like they know what the Bible says and they're afraid of what it says. And they're out to try to change. If they can convince enough of people that this which is written doesn't have to come about, if we will but just change our mind and unite ourselves in a common cause. That's why there seems to be such a spirit in America, and I know it is in Israel the same, among the younger generations, that there is no God, or they doubt that there is a God. I know when we was over there in '68, the two guys we had were young men. They'd been in the Israeli army during the 6-Day War. That was in '67. Then it was '68 when we was there. So they were both fresh from the effects of what the 6-Day War accomplished. And as we rode around with them and they explained different things, I could see that being around us and what we talked about, they began to become curious. And they even began to wonder, well, maybe these Gentile fellows are right after all. But I don't know that we changed them after we left, because we was back there other times, but we was never privileged to see them. But it seems like Israel and the United States right here in this 20th century now, as it closes out to begin to make ready for the new millennium, there seems like a similarity. The philosophers on both sides trying to rewrite history. And they know that they can't change the old concept that lays in the minds of the older ones. But their idea is, well, if we can just educate the younger generation to believe in the future the way we're designing it, well, after a while, the older ones will die off. And then we have clear sailings. Brothers and sisters, that might be one way to think we can get around God and what He's promised. But I think when a man or a woman, young or old, in a time as this, think that God is just going to be traded off that cheap without Him showing Himself somewhere in the affairs of man, I think it's stupid on our part to even think that. Now tonight, in the 60th chapter of Isaiah, it's a chapter that's been laying here for centuries of time. It gives you a description what God is going to do in behalf of Israel in that era of time when it has come time to rebuild the old city and the temple. Now we hear much in the politics today that the Palestinians, they not only want what was captured in the 6-Day War, they want the borders to be reestablished, but as they declare a Palestinian state, their motive is to eventually absorb the territories where the Jews are at. If they can convince the Jews that they're not to have a state, but they're just to coexist with the Palestinians. Now that's the way the Palestinians have things figured. And if they can get Jerusalem to be the capital city of a Palestinian state, then they feel then that annuls anything that the Jews believing in the Bible will have to be nil and void. But we're going to have to ask ourselves the question, is this the Word of God? Is it true? Is it a book that we can put confidence in? As I said this morning, for the last number of years, it appears that God, knowing that certain things are to be, and it's written in His Scriptures, so He's just folding His hands. And He's stopped meddling in the affairs of men. He's just let them go and make their choice, make up their mind, design the future the way they want it. Now, one thing I forgot this morning, when I was bringing out about the miracles that have occurred through time, as America and her soldiers have been involved in conflict in an international way. Shortly after I got home from the war in World War II, I used to get a lot of tracts from what they call the Pilgrim Tract Society. I don't know whether they print anymore or not. But they was more or less just an interdenominational group of people that printed all these kinds of tracts for the purpose of distribution. I got a big bunch of them, and in there was one tract, and it was titled The White Cavalry. This incident, you won't read about it in history books, because for some reason or other, though it's noticeable, it's very exciting to read about it, to know that how God intervened in a certain realm the way He did. But this was evidently between the winters of 19 and 17 and 18, when certain elements of the Allies, the American troops and British troops, had been pinned down in trenches, and you'd have to read some of the horrible stories, how they dug these deep trenches, and then the rains just came and just kept filling these trenches with water. These men lived on little shelves dug in the side of the bank, while the trench itself was filled with mud. And they would build their little fires out of just most anything and cook their meals. And many of the men took sick, living and dying in such states of that was. But according to this tract, which was not a long one, the Allies had been in these trenches for weeks on end. Their supplies was running low. And they knew that the Germans was going to open up with an offensive. They could just tell by the way certain things developed. And they had been told, save your ammunition, because the roads to where they were at, they were so bad. They could not expect to receive any kind of supplies. So on the dreadful morning when the Allies began to feel it could take place any time, all of a sudden there was a barrage of artillery opened up from the Germans. And that's the way they do. They try to pulverize your place where you're at, kill as many by this. As the artillery opened up, then as the artillery shuts down, over the trench walls came the Germans right across the open battlefield. When all of a sudden, from the Germans left to right, there seems to be a column of white cavalrymen in a slow gallop, intercepted them and stopped them. The commander of the white cavalry said to the German officers, "You surrender," and called the Allied commander by name. "You surrender to him." The Germans in all that period of time, they could see nothing but the white cavalry. So as they moved over to surrender them to the Allied commander, and as the process was completed, all of a sudden then the white cavalry disappears. And the German soldiers are now prisoners. So there hadn't been no terrible conflict. Now today, brothers and sisters, the modern philosophy is we want to shelve these things. We don't want our future people to believe that there is such a fanatical thing like this for people to believe in. But I want to tell you, brothers and sisters, when men have lived under the conditions that they had lived in for weeks, and they were faced with the possibility that they would be killed in the final onslaught as the Germans made their advances, then all of a sudden the whole thing changes, because there's been a big scene of the miraculous take place. And the white cavalry intervenes. Who is this white cavalry? None other than angels of God. It's the same ones, brothers and sisters, that when Elisha was there, he sat in his cabin and he had his servant, and the Syrians was encamped all about them. Old Elisha was just sitting in there, just minding his own business, meditating. But as his servant looked out the window, he kept saying to his master, "Master, don't you care?" He could see all these Syrians out there. But Elisha didn't seem to care a bit. And finally Elisha said to the Lord, "Lord, open the young man's eyes that he might see." What he did, he looked out there and he saw more for them than there was against them. And see, this just absolutely shakes up and rattles and confines the intellectual mind. He can't perceive this. And especially in an hour as this, when we've lived a few short years since World War II, there's been the great trend all over the world, especially in the communist world. They try to prove there is no God. We have found that out scientifically, while the rest of the world has had to drift along and cope with different things. But now then it's become more apparent that the world as a whole, from the political and the intellectual, is fast giving in to this atheistic evolutionary trend that there is no God. There's no such thing as this era of the miraculous. Now tonight when I read this and explain some things, I would like for us to realize we still serve the same God. We've served the Lord through the Lord Jesus Christ for a number of years because of salvation. But I have to say tonight, the door of salvation could just be about over. And we're going to see the Lord and His coming altogether different, on a different standpoint. We're going to see His intervention in world affairs, bringing an end to certain trends, because He's going to turn things around and change it. When we begin to hear the trends in America, well, crime has decreased such and such, that is a lie. They got a shrewd way of recategorizing crime, what it is and what it isn't. Crime that all used to be under one category, they split it up and they put it under another. So then that way they don't name this crime over here, they name it something else. But crime over here, well, they say, well, it's dropped, say, 8%. Brothers and sisters, every time you turn the TV on and the news come on, here's another crime. Somebody has been found stabbed to death in their house, right in Louisville, in our area. Look at Harrison County, what it's had in the last year. It's a shame. I have to say, brothers and sisters, when people as a whole lose their conscience that there is a God, that they're going to have to pay accountability to one of these days for allowing themselves to be persuaded and led to do all of these atrocities. I have to look back then, brothers and sisters, when they allowed that atheistic woman a few years back to petition across the land and get the U.S. Supreme Court to make it a crime, to read the Bible, to have prayer in school, and on and on and on the fall keeps going. So tonight, turn with me in the 60th chapter of Isaiah. This 60th chapter has been laying here for centuries. But to me it describes what's going to take place in the Middle East, in the Holy Land, once the era of the miraculous does take place. Right in front of us, there has got to be a short era of time that there is absolutely going to be miracles after miracles after miracles on an international basis. When we hear of the youth of America and we see the morals, and now they got a new drug, ecstasy, they're capturing this stuff. I remember a time, brothers and sisters, if you had walked up to teenagers and took out of your pocket a pill, what's that? 9 times out of 10, I don't want it. The American public was self-conscious. You did not even get them to mess around with alcohol. While sometimes, yes, young boys was guilty of taking and going behind a building or something and taking a swig out of a bottle of whiskey. Some of them, they became, yes, little drunks. Later on, and others, they said, I don't want no more of that stuff. I remember when I went overseas in the war, they put me in an old regular outfit that had been an outfit of artillery before the war even started. And naturally, they were old-timers, and they were just habitual men that drank beer constantly. Well, then I had never touched it. I never drank it. Well, they got to razzing me, and me and another young fellow. I think we had been in the outfit about 4 days. This was on the Hawaiian Islands, and where the camp was out behind a bunch of sugarcane fields. But every evening when activity would shut down, we had the right to go to the kitchen and eat. Then they had a little PX change, just a little tent place there where they sold the beer and the soft drinks and little cups of ice cream, candy bars and stuff. Me and this young little fellow, we would go down there and get some ice cream and a bottle of Coke. We'd sit down on the walkway. Well, here were some of these old fellows sitting there, hey, almost just practically called us sissies because we didn't drink. You'll be just like us. I said, no, we won't. Oh, yes, you will. That's what they all say. Well, they got to really razzing us pretty hard. And I'll never forget Corporal Clark. He was a big fellow from Virginia. He was just coming from the shower tent, and all he had was a towel wrapped around his loins. He had spent 12 weeks in commando training, and he knew the ropes on judo, and karate and all the 9 yards of it. When he heard that old bunch of old-timers sitting there, there's about 6 of them, razzing me and this other young fellow, I never seen a man get so mad in my life as quick as he did. He jumped right down in the midst, and boy, he pointed his index finger, and he began to curse them. He says, if I ever hear you one of them, I'll beat the blankety blank blank out of every one of you. They got quiet. And we just sat there. And he walked on. When he got out of earshot, them boys, every one, apologized. Says, we're sorry. I've always looked back at the incident and said, that was God's grace in my life. Because from then on, brothers and sisters, or the whole time I was overseas in that outfit, never did anybody razz me. I became their buddy. They trusted me to be honest. And many times when payday would come around, there was always those who liked to get around and play a game of cards or dice and stuff, and they liked to gamble. But as sure as payday came, here would come this one. Jackson, will you keep this for me? Jackson, will you keep this for me? My pocketbook used to be a bank for a lot of the boys in the outfit because they trusted me to keep it. And I would keep it because they knew I wouldn't gamble it away. And all through the war until we was discharged, they respected me. I look back on that year of time, and I've said many times, Lord, thank you. You did not have to do it. But you knew, Lord, how humiliating it can be for a bunch of old-timers to just razz somebody. From then on, brothers and sisters, every one of them guys would have fought for me. To think how quick a corporal gave him a good talking to, but you ought to have heard what he said. When he got through saying what he did, they sat there very calm and weak. And from then on, that corporal himself, he became my buddy. Now then, I have to say all those things, brothers and sisters. There's a God that sits in the heavens, and he can rule in the affairs of men. And I have to believe, brothers and sisters, America, he knew America would come to this. But I believe up the road, brothers and sisters, there is an hour of turmoil and something God's going to bring across the face of America to change this thing, turn it around, and get it back where it's going to be. But now, until that time comes, I want to deal with this tonight from the Israeli standpoint. As I've been privileged to communicate with this elderly lady that communicates for us to the Messianic Jews, the many times that she's talked, and you can see the heartbroken feeling that she has about why the nation, the political leadership, has sold the nation down the drain to this modernistic philosophy. And if it went on forever, yes, we'd have to say, then the God of this book is no longer the God of reality. He don't exist. But I have to say tonight, because I'm really saying these things basically, as a Gentile and as a people, how we look at the Bible. And so the time has come. Last Sunday we read Micah, the 7th chapter, because there it tells what God said he would do when the day came that thy walls are to be rebuilt. I have to say, in the mind of God, when he calls that prophet 700 and some years before the first advent of Christ to write those words, God knew that he's got a day, he's got a precise time. He's going to rule in the affairs of men and change the whole picture of things. Because, brothers and sisters, right now the PLOs, they want Jerusalem. Well, Jerusalem is where the temple's going to be built. Even one of their chief rabbis said, well, it's not worth fighting over this sacred spot. I'd have to say, what good is a rabbi who begins to change the whole hope and the beliefs of the ancients? And for a rabbi to say that that 6 million Jews that was martyred was all sinners. No, they weren't. Because, brothers and sisters, that's not the revelation of the 5th seal. The brothers and sisters, the revelation of the 6th seal, when the prophet wrote and sent all these souls under the altar. How long, O Lord, holy and true? Before anything was said to them, angels will sing, bringing white robes and given to every one of them. Giving them white robes showed they were given eternal life, so they weren't lost. But once they've got these white robes and it drapes their soul, then the words were said that they should rest a little season. Now a little season don't mean 200 or 300 years, until their fellow brethren and servants should be killed as they were. So that goes to show, brothers and sisters, in that number of 6 million that was killed in World War II, and up there under the throne of heaven is those souls of those martyred Jews. Imagine being lined up against a wall or at the edge of a trench and machine guns chattering away. Imagine the little mothers with little babies, little ones holding to their apron or such. A lot of them were stripped down naked as they were shot and allowed to fall into the pits. I wonder the thoughts, God, if you're real, why does this have to be? But once that last breath has gone, that spirit has to wake up in glory, realizing, yes, God still is real. If he had not allowed it to happen, the rest of Jewry would never have wanted to leave Europe. God, in a sense, had to allow it to produce the same motivations in the living element of Jews, that when God did set the stage, they would be ready to come back to the land just like it was down in Egypt. So when I say that, brothers and sisters, this little season between then and the week of Daniel has to be culminated in a one period of a lifetime, a lifespan. So I have to feel like it's just ahead of us. Now then, the Scripture shows to us that the temple is to be rebuilt. It shows that the old walled city is to be rebuilt. Now this cannot take place just haphazardly any time. We've got a lot of Gentiles, doctors of divinity, historians. They try to calculate and do a lot of things. But the way the Scriptures are written, and the way certain Scriptures and prophecies read, you can put it together just like putting a crossword puzzle together. You see the shapes of these pieces. You see what they contain. So it said in Micah 7, as I read last Sunday, in the day that thy walls are to be built. So I know tonight God's got a day. He's got a period of time that he calls in the day. It don't necessarily mean a day of 24 hours, but it does mean a precise time. Right when the world is trying their best to turn the tide and change things, God's got a day. And that day is what he shows himself. And I have to say, when God does show himself, it's going to change the attitude of a lot of intellectuals and educators in America. When we hear of dope literally tearing the moral structure out of youth, deranging the mentality of their brain, with their concept of thinking. They can hardly even act like a human being in principles. It's a tragedy. When you see some of these rap groups and these modern entertainers, how they disfigure their features, deck themselves with all kinds of rings, that's worse than the black man did in the Middle Ages in Africa. I would have never thought, brothers and sisters, that youth from, we will say, modern society could stoop so low as to put rings in their lips, rings in their tongue, rings in their nose, rings in their ears, disfigure their flesh with all kinds of snakes and all kinds of tattoos. It looks like hell. And they live. Down in Harrison County, was just in this week's paper, they've had a group. They don't know yet who they are. But they've been printing all kinds and painting all kinds of confetti on buildings, cars parked at churches, and different things. Swastikas. They'll find out one of these days. But I have to say, 50 years ago, we didn't have a youthful society that stooped so low. Today, there seems to be a concept in their brain. They can't stoop low enough. They got to terrorize. They got to brutalize somebody. We got to do this to have a good time. Well, I have to say, brothers and sisters, if they feel that that's having a good time, that's when I can say, Lord, send a tornado and take them all away. I say that with sincerity. That would do it quickly. They might see, brothers and sisters, that there is truly a God that can change the whole picture. So, brothers and sisters, if there's a millennium ahead, and that millennium is going to be an era of time that lasts 1,000 years, when Jesus Christ, with his bride, will return to the earth to set up a kingdom wherein righteousness will be the center of rule, and the law shall go forth from Zion, and the word of the Lord from Jerusalem in that day. All nations will flow. Now, when I say all nations, that's what the Bible says. But let's try to understand. When the millennium starts, there probably will be a small remnant of the races and nations of people preserved. So, brothers and sisters, as that period of time starts, it can be very possible, yes, many from different nations can all go at once. But by the time that the millennium does begin to get started, into 20 or 30 years, you've got to begin to realize the Holy Land is not a large place. The Holy Land is about the size of the state of Rhode Island. And I have to believe, as population will increase in numbers in the millennium, the time will come when it will be utterly impossible for everybody of the nations at one time to go to the Holy Land. What a conglomeration it would be. That it will fall definitely, brothers and sisters, into a representation, where then all nations become represented to the king and so forth. But think of the people, brothers and sisters, in remote regions like in the South Pacific, even in Central Africa, that hardly ever have heard anything. Yes, they're going to hear in that hour, because the bride of Christ is going to set and rule over the nations of the earth. And they're going to learn, and they're going to become knowledgeable of God, that he's got certain laws that he wants established, because it's laws, brothers and sisters, how nations and races of people are to live coexisting one with another. So there's no need for any politician of this day to think that he's educated enough to accomplish such a deal. The devil won't let it be that way. The devil's got a concept. So when the hour of time arrives, I have to say, God's got a day, and he will give the signal. And when I say that, that means there's going to be war in the Middle East break out. It's the only thing that's going to change and start turning things around. And that's why, brothers and sisters, in Micah 7 it says, the things that God will do in a miraculous way is going to so confound the wise and the mighty, that nations, civilized nations, that boast of their technology and stuff, the leaders are going to come crawling out of their holes with their hands clasped over their mouths. because they can't help but stop and realize there's a God after all. And I have to say, I'll be glad when I can see that hour come. I've said, Lord, let me live to see the hour. Not for selfish personal reasons, but I just want to see what some of these politicians and educators are going to say. When all of a sudden they wake up some morning and they hear that that Israeli army has struck across the border of Jordan. It's went through the country of Jordan. It's laid that land low. In a matter of hours, they will conquer and subdue the Moabites, the Ammonites, and the Edomites. That's what the Bible says. Just as King David did it, so will Israel do it one more time. Because what this accomplishes, it's going to accomplish, brothers and sisters, God will put a fear in these people that Israel conquers. And these are the Arabs, the Palestinians, the Islamics, that for centuries now has put up a bulwark against the idea we will not allow the Jew to come back here and establish ourselves according to ancient times. So God has to do it. And it's going to also be an eye-opener to the American Christian people and the American political picture, because it's going to stop the nations of the world. Now, as I read this, try to picture in your mind there's going to be a war in the Middle East. No, it won't last 6 years. It will not last 6 months. Because wars that Israel ever fought only lasted a matter of days. Either God was in it or the enemy conquered. But when God was in it, then, brother, it lasted just many times by an hour or 2 or 3 days, and it was all over. And so it's a war, brothers and sisters, that God shows himself, and it's his way of getting the picture of things turned around. And when he does it, I have to say, every politician throughout this world is going to know now from then on there's a God after all. With that in mind, it shook Egypt. It's brought her to her knees. It shook Syria, and that Israeli army will not stop till they've laid the land desolate from Egypt plumb to the Euphrates River. That's taken everything in that covers the covenant that God gave to Abraham. That will be, brothers and sisters, what's this going to do to the overall Arab Islamic world, which is in Saudi Arabia, Mecca? It kills that religious spirit, because it plainly tells you in Zephaniah, the 2nd chapter, that in that day, when God sees that it's necessary to show his power, he said he will famish all the gods of the earth in that day. Now that's how the prophet of old spoke it. But put it in our day, modern language. He will see to it that all the religions of the earth will dry up. That's what it means. No, it won't be in 6 years. Because God's going to put such a fear in these people that Israel has to conquer. And it's going to be seen and demonstrated universally. And I have to say, brothers and sisters, I'm going to dramatize it like this. Theaters are going to go broke for a short period of time, because people are going to be took up. They just can't wait to see the evening news, because it's going to change so rapidly. Such new developments, it's going to have the world shocked, because it's God's way of getting attention. I have to say, there's youth out here tonight running berserk, spinning their wheels, injecting dope, never thinking that there's anything lying ahead that could possibly change their future. Well, there's a God up there, and he's going to bring everything in this book to pass. Now, what I'm going to read to you is not what he's going to do for Russia, nor for England nor Germany. It's what he's going to do for Israel. Because the modern concept is there's no need of Israel coming back and becoming a state and enlarging her borders, trying to live as on the promises of the ancient. Now let's come back and let's begin to get along with everybody. It ain't going to be that way. So the war has hit. Did it last 6 months? No. It didn't last 6 weeks. But the news, Israel has laid to waste everything from Egypt to the Euphrates. When you read the 19th chapter of Isaiah, in that day Judah will be a terror unto Egypt. I wished it would break tonight. How many know what the word terror means? It's like a bulldog. When God shows himself on Israel's behalf, he promised it. He won't fail Israel. What's the purpose, Brother Jackson? Because when God does this, he's going to show from one end of this planet to the other. To the Hindus, the Buddhists, the Shintos, all the others of this world. There's a God of Israel. And he's now on the scene. He's going to show himself in reality. Because the purpose of it is to cause an element of young people. Sit up. Take notice. Because I'm going to change your thinking. I have to say, if the Lord did not do that and lets the young generation on the earth now continue on in their present trend, there won't be a 16, 18-year-old person left fit to carry over in the millennium. Their bloodline, their flesh will be so filled with evil of dope and drugs, they won't even be fit to bear a child in the millennium. So on one standpoint, that's God's way of preserving an element of youth. Yes, I have to believe there could be a few older people. But since the millennium is called the regeneration by Jesus in Matthew 19, God's got to intervene and cut this thing short. He's not going to let everybody be brainwashed and then sell their flesh out to the devil to participate in all of these evil atrocities and stuff. Every morning crying. A young boy going to see a young girl who's got a little baby. And because the baby cries, he picks the baby up and he don't like it, he shakes it till it dies. How many heard the news this week? You know what I think ought to be done to him? No, don't take him to court. Just inject the stuff in his arm and let him go to sleep. Get him out of his misery. He ain't fit to live. Brother Jackson, what do you think? Like, you're supposed to be a Christian. I know it. You know what? I'm quoting the Old Testament to you. He that does not honor his father and mother, let him be put to death. Back in those days, they had rock concerts. But there was no music around to play. They took them out to the edge of the city, and everybody had their rock. They had a concert. They got rid of that devil quick. But no, we're going to rehabilitate. No, you ain't rehabilitating them. Because, brothers and sisters, as fast as we build our jails, we fill them with that type of species. So that's why God shows himself. And he does it. And it's actually, brothers and sisters, he's being merciful to some, but he's being a God of justice and judgment to others. It's his way of turning a lot of people's mind and attitude around. Now, it doesn't bring worldwide conversion, forget it. But it does change the concept of a lot of young people the world over. So we can say, whatever is accomplished, God has been seen. God has demonstrated himself. The spiritual Jew has now seized the opportunity. Now we will build our temple, and we will rebuild the city. It's got to be rebuilt, because this is the way it's to be for the millennium. Now, the 60th chapter of Isaiah describes you, the attitude, and how a lot of people from the world over think. I'll read the first verse. Now the word is to Israel, arise and shine, for thy light is come, and the glory of the Lord is risen upon thee. Now once that takes place, Never again will the decree of Deuteronomy 28 be applied to Israel anymore. Her chastisement is over. God will no longer be chastening them. He's now on their behalf. But here's how it looks to the world in general. For behold, the darkness shall cover the earth. What kind of darkness? Is that talking about celestial lights, the moon and the sun? No. It's talking about spiritual darkness. And I have to say, America, one of the greatest nations, not because of its size, but because it was founded at a time when men who wanted to lead, they put God first in their lives. This caused the population to eventually have to choose to follow in the same pattern. Yes, while Europe looked upon us as a little nation out of the wilderness and didn't think we'd ever amount to much, but it was in Teddy Roosevelt's hour that thing was changed. So Europe began to realize it is a nation. And I'll have to say, brothers and sisters, for years, God caused America's society to live in such a fashion that European tourists or whoever traveled said America is different than other nations. They are good because their society thinks different. So, brothers and sisters, look at it tonight. Crime, dope, all kinds of evil devices. When the sun goes down, the devils come out. We call them bugs. Did you ever watch nature? In the daytime, you don't see too many bugs out crawling around in sunlight. But let night creep in. Turn the light on suddenly. Oh, there goes a cockroach. Get him! He's trying to use the darkness to go from one hole to another. That's the way these devils are. But tonight I have to say, the evil that fills the corners of America, I have to still say, it's the potential best nation under the earth, on the earth to be born in. But you cannot walk the streets of our metropolitan cities like it was 40 and 50 years ago. I can remember, brothers and sisters, I had a cousin that lived on Fulton Street in Jeffersonville. Fulton Street takes you right up and leads you right straight to the government depot. And the main entrance was down here just 2 blocks away. There was a school just beyond that point. When my cousin was going to school, they didn't haul them in those days. In the city of Jeffersonville, they all walked to school. There was a policeman. Every morning, it was his job to walk his beat and to come up here, and he stood on the corner of Fulton and 10th Street to help and escort the children across this intersection. But as he would come walking along, out of the house would come small children. And they had an attraction to this officer. It was nothing to see him going up the street with about a half a dozen young ones hanging on him. He was a model to them. Every morning it was that way when school was in session. We hear all together the opposite picture today because their thinking ain't like that. That was America yesteryears. Well, you see it the way it is tonight. Darkness covers the earth. It means spiritual ignorance and the lack of spirituality. It's caused the light of the knowledge of God to go out in our big institutions. Darkness covers the earth, and gross darkness the people. No wonder they live like they do. No wonder they think like they do. Don't talk to me about God. I don't believe in that bunch of fanatical nonsense. Well, I do. I believe he's just the same to today as he was yesterday. He ain't asleep. He's just absolutely folded his hands and waiting until everybody else makes up their mind, makes their choice. Now, but the Lord shall arise upon thee, Israel, and his glory shall be seen upon thee, Israel. As I speak this tonight, I pray that the Messianic Jew that would hear my voice, there's hope ahead. There's going to be light ahead. We might think that the way the modern leaders think, that it couldn't be. But God's got his way, going to change the whole thing around. Verse 3. Yes, darkness covers the earth amongst the Gentile nation. But it says here, and the Gentiles shall come to thy light. In other words, they're going to come when they begin to see the situation in Israel change and the society begins to take on a new concept. It's going to create such an interest. Brothers and sisters, I have to say, every El Al airplane is going to be loaded with tourists wanting to go see what's going on in Israel. It would demand it. And the Gentiles shall come to thy light, and kings to the brightness of thy rising. In other words, they're going to want to see what's happened in Israel. What's causing her to look like or act like this, to think like this. Yes, right now, who wants to be a part of it? But I'll have to say, once God opens up that era of the miraculous to make himself known, then I have to say, it's going to cause people from all over this world to begin to want to watch Israel. I got the other day a big envelope from a certain organization that's trying more or less, we will say, through the political realms to fight against this thing of what the Supreme Court has done. But I couldn't help but read what the Supreme Court in recent months has actually done. Yes, you remember the young girl down in Texas that wanted to volunteer to lead this football game in prayer. And then finally, when this thing was brought before the Supreme Court, that old bunch of rascals, put in office for life. Bunch of old men, too old and cantankerous. I don't care how much education they got. I don't care how much they know about the laws of the United States. They're old men. Why can't they use young men? And they get an old crank and put him in office for life. And he sits there to judge and to interpret the Constitution. God only knows how much they made the Constitution and turned it around and made a lie out of it. God's got a day for them. Right now they got their day, but God's got a day. But my point is this: Gentiles are going to come to the brightness. It don't sound like that now, does it? But it's sure going to be then. And it's not going to be 16 years off. All right. Now then, verse 4. Lift up thine eyes round about and see. All they gather themselves together. They come to thee. Now this is God's way of saying to Israel, look, once this miraculous era is accomplished its purpose, now he'll say to Israel, look who's coming your way. Because out here in the international realms is still other Jews that for somehow or other have never been touched by the need to go home to the land of Palestine. But now, when they see the hand of God, and I have to say, brothers and sisters, this could not have happened 500 years ago. Because God could have absolutely accomplished an era of miraculous, and on the other side of the planet, they would have never known about it for 6 months or a year because of communications and stuff. But now then, since look at what the satellite has done. It's brought communication and TV right on the spot. Bring it right into your living room. That's going to be an eye-opener for people around this globe to suddenly see the hand of God intervene in the affairs of men, so that dispersed Jews that are still living out there, when they see this, they can't help but open their hearts and say, oh Lord, I want to go back to my homeland, because it's God's way of creating a drawing factor to pull them back there. So every one of these words is going to be fulfilled. Yes, All they gather themselves together. They come to thee, thy sons shall come from far, and thy daughters shall be nursed at thy side. In other words, here is where God's going to console the immigrants that come. And in a spiritual sense, in other words, like they're little infants. Something has to happen that causes God to touch their spiritual makeup and begin, we will say, to pacify them and assure them. Because actually, as I read from this writer, across the globe, there's a lot of Jews, they call themselves the Jews, but they've lost hope, they've lost confidence, and that's why they've never even had a desire to go back. But that's why this scripture has to read like this. It's God's way of touching them, opening their eyes. Come on, come on. Come back to the land of your nativity. Then, again he's still speaking to the Israelite. Then thou shalt see and flow together. Yes, your society. You come from different lands with different concepts, with different philosophies. It's hard for you to agree. But once God shows his miraculous power, how he's going to improve and, we will say, change the event of things, then his word will be. Then you will flow together. You will lay down your old ideas, and you will want to agree. Yes, and thine heart shall fear and be enlarged, because the abundance of the sea. Now, tonight, brothers and sisters, there is not one Gentile nation that I know of, from its governmental leadership standpoint, that is even talking about wanting to do anything to help rebuild Israel, because they're all a part of this great new world global order. So they're not making any plans to do personally anything for Israel. They're doing everything they can to try to shut her down and say, now you must be a good little nation now and come along and just blend in with everything else. But when God looks at it, and these words are beginning to be fulfilled, that's why I have to say, Lord, you don't have to, but just let me live long enough to see this. I want to see what next day's newspaper says. I want to see how Professor Fosdick changed his mind. I want to see how some of these atheistic evolutionary professors that have spoke their big yakety yak yak stuff, I want to see if they've changed their minds yet. I believe some of them are going to have to. And I can see teenagers getting up to go to school, but after having watched about a week of this miraculous, they're going to go to school, and they're going to go with a lot of questions. Principal, what's our subject going to be on today? Do you remember the news last night, what it showed? Let's study out of the Bible. Let's see if that is the truth. Now, I'm just paraphrasing that, brothers and sisters, but God's got a way of opening the eyes of people. Yep. The abundance of the sea shall be converted. This is not talking about salvational conversion. This is talking about material things being suddenly changed in its course on its international world market. And I have to say, what do they call this New World Trade Agreement, GATT? Boy, they're going to change it then. Because there's a lot of stuff, brothers and sisters, God's going to change it himself. Because it's going to go to Israel. Because all of a sudden, the world over, people that never thought of such a thing is going to have their minds changed overnight. Politicians, businessmen, everything that's going to be necessary for God to fulfill his word, God's going to see that it's changed. That's why, brothers and sisters, for several years now, there's a group of Jews, and they're along also with a lot of Gentiles. They call it the Third Temple Movement. They're taking up money, they're donating pledges, and they want to have it ready so that when they are, they think that the Antichrist gives them permission to build the temple. Well, I want to go on record as saying, no Antichrist is going to allow Israel to build her temple. Oh, no. The Antichrist ain't going to have a thing to do with this. When that Israeli army invades Moab, Edom, and then thrust down through Saudi Arabia, and her sword is stuck in the air called Dedan, God said, I will do this by my servant Israel in the latter days. What does that do to all that Arab Islamic world? It kills that Mohammed spirit. Now, I could be shocked, yes, if a Muslim was to hear me say this. But I have to say, sir, you let me live long enough till this is fulfilled, and then you come back and see if you still want to do what you came here to do. Because, brothers and sisters, when I begin to read here the nations that you know tonight are Muslim, and they've been aggressive, militant, and they've absolutely put Jews to flight. They've arrested them, put them in jail, tortured them through the last hundreds of years. God's going to kill that spirit. Because, brothers and sisters, this is His way of using these Arab societies, once they've been changed, to think and to believe and to see like the Jew thinks. This thing in the Middle East is not going together the way the New World Order thinks. They got a lot of things on paper. They can negotiate and plan a lot of things. But when the day comes for it to be changed, then get ready for the shock of your life. That thing that calls herself the United Nations is going to have an abortion. It's God's way of doing it. Now then, the abundance of the sea, this is, we will say, it's a picture of how God suddenly moves through nations, governments. In the prophets of Haggai, did not God say, the gold and the silver and the cattle of 1,000 hills are His? He owns it all. So why should God have anybody to pass the hat, to take up an offering, to rebuild Jerusalem, to build the temple? No. He's just got a way, brothers and sisters. He shows His power, and then He moves on the hearts of societies. I think of Bill Gates, Donald Trump, and all these millionaires of America. They pledged so many hundreds and thousands and millions of dollars to such international causes. I hope they live till this hour comes, because I can see the finger of God. Bill Gates, come here. Now, God won't have to speak audible words. But when Bill Gates looks through television and sees the results in the Middle East, don't tell me Bill Gates ain't going to look to his future. Donald Trump is too. Others like that. I don't say all of them, but he knows where all the wealth of the world is at. And when the abundance of the sea becomes converted to him, he's got a way of touching the heart of the wealthy. I want some of what you've got. And he'll get it. Now then, so when the wealth, the material substance, begin to flow, for what purpose? It's God's way of causing the Jewish people. They've enlarged their borders. They did it in a matter of days. Now they are going to build their temple. There's no opposition. The Islamic world is not against them. In fact, the Islamic world, what's left of it, the Arab world, is now going to be in agreement with them. Why? Because God has conquered them and killed that old religious spirit of Islam. Now let us see how things begin to go together. All right. And the forces of the Gentiles shall come unto thee. Anything that Israel needs, here it comes. 6th verse. We're looking south, and we're looking east, down into Saudi Arabia, in that region right now, where it's nothing but Muslims. This is the homeland of Muhammad. The multitude of camels shall cover thee. Here they come out of Saudi Arabia. The dromedaries of Medan, that's a little town in Saudi Arabia. And Ephah, all they from Sheba, that's in Saudi Arabia, shall come. They shall bring gold and incense, and they shall show forth the praises of the Lord. I tell you, God's going to have a great revival in the Middle East. And it ain't because a preacher stood over there. It's His way of showing Himself.
It's his way of touching the heart of a king, a politician, a wealthy man, a businessman. I want that. Bring it. And since these Arabs, brothers and sisters, are cousins to the Jew, they've taken a licking. They had to recognize the army of God. And now that they see, as I read in the Jerusalem Post, one of her writers, he made a comment like the temple could be dropped from heaven, built by God. Well, God's going to build it, but it ain't coming down out of heaven. God's going to use men. He's going to touch the heart of people. And the substance is right here. And so as the Jews began to gather and collect, in your mind, try to picture convoys of modern trucks leaving Saudi Arabia with all kinds of material. Keep in mind, Saudi Arabia is the richest Arab country in the Middle East. With this in mind, and they show forth the praises of God. Yes, it means this. They're going to be turned now then to believe in the same God of Israel, Elohim, as their ancestors did. Then the next verse. Here comes out of the regions of southern Jordan all the flocks of Kedar. You'll find this name in Genesis 25. This is one of the sons of Abraham. All the flocks of Kedar shall be gathered together. Right now, Israel does not have an animal breeding program to start offering sacrifice because they're uncertain as to when this hour could ever be. So see, God has already planned it. God don't wait for Israel to start an animal breeding program to make sacrificial animals. No, down there in Jordan is an element of Bedouin people. They got plenty of goats and sheep. And they're the quality and they're the type that God says, I'll accept them. And these people are going to be willingly bringing them to Israel. Here they are. Go ahead and start your sacrifice. Because Islam has been destroyed from all these people. The rams of Nebaioth shall minister unto thee. They shall come up with acceptance on mine altar. Now notice we will say the conclusion of this verse. And I will glorify the house of my glory. That's the temple. Yes, it is. It's the temple. And I have to believe, brothers and sisters, once this thing starts, what kind of a reaction on an international scale will this bring about in other parts of the world? Do you think Russia is going to be pleased in this? A complete communistic, atheistic society? Think of also Iran, which was ancient Persia, and those regions. Here's where a lot of people have never understood Ezekiel 38. A lot of our charismatic preachers tell you that Ezekiel 38 is involved in Armageddon. Remember, Armageddon doesn't take place till the week of Daniel is on its closing end. But Ezekiel takes place just before the week of Daniel, because it is no doubt the final war that ends with God showing again his miraculous hand. And this sets the stage then for the world to negotiate and necessitate then the week of time to be set in. But when this war that we've just talked about, when Israel is used by God to hit Egypt, Saudi Arabia, Moab, the Ammonites, and the Edomites, don't forget, you and I, brothers and sisters, have never heard much in days gone by. But it all goes back to when God allowed the two southern tribes to be carried away into Babylonian captivity around 600 BC. This is in, I think, the 136th Psalm. These Babylonians having these Jewish people out along the river Euphrates, I could see them there in work detail, having to do all kinds, we will say, of manual labor. And these Babylonians, all because they have been a superior militant people, they look upon these, we will say, these prisoners in this work detail. They tease them, they taunt them. Why don't you sing us a song of Zion? Just imagine, you put yourself there. Sing us a song of Zion. They're doing it, brothers and sisters, not because they like them. They're doing it to tease them, to humiliate them. And I can see them as they labor away in some kind of manual labor, tears coming into their eyes. And their reply is, how can we sing the songs of Zion in a strange land? And then all of a sudden, they look up into the heavens and they say, "Oh Lord, remember Edom." They had a reason for saying these words, and you and I have read it, but we never got the picture. But they look at, "Oh Lord, remember Edom in the day of Jerusalem." The day of Jerusalem is right in front of you. That's why Zechariah 12 says, "In that day I'll make Jerusalem a cup of trembling." Yasser Arafat, he has just went to Turkey. He's trying to find out how Turkey stands, and the country of Turkey stands toward, if there becomes a Palestinian state, will they sanction it? And the government of Turkey says yes. Arafat has also approached the head man of France. Will you accept the Palestinian state? Will you recognize it? Will your government accept it? Yes. But I must first ask the other parts of the European bloc. Now, if this is going on right now, brothers and sisters, how these different nations will look and accept the Palestinian state, that should tell you and let you know the hour of Jerusalem is hanging right over your head. Because right in here, Arafat has said, he will declare then a Palestinian state in the month of September. And I know, brothers and sisters, their plans and plots is, once they negotiate and we will say, claim this, their feelings is they will have international agreement with them that they can begin to put psychological pressure upon the Jewish people to back off and let us have Jerusalem as the capital. Brothers and sisters, I have to say we're close to the hour when Jerusalem will become the #1 news item, and it will probably last for days on end, because God will cause it to become a cup of trembling. Now, there's two ways to look at a cup of trembling. You can picture it like it's a bunch of drunk men passing a cup to drink a toast. No, this is not a bunch of drunk men nervously spilling. This is a picture of a bunch of men. They're going to be compelled to drink of it, but it's creating an intra-nervousness because there's a fear attached to it. They're going to hope it works. That's why, brothers and sisters, it's a cup of trembling to the Arab world as they plan to negotiate this. This is what sets the stage. When God does break and tear it to pieces, then he throws it into this war in the Middle East. That changes the whole picture of things. But as it becomes a cup of trembling, that's for the Arabs. But then the next thing is, and it'll be a burdensome stone. That's your international negotiating process. Now, brothers and sisters, a burdensome stone don't necessarily mean it's big, but it means it's so shaped, it's hard to get a hold of it and pick it up. Did you ever have an item around the house or a farm somewhere that you had to pick it up? It was not always necessarily the weight, but it's the way the thing's shaped. You just can't get a hold of it in the right spot to make it convenient. And you can be bent all out of shape when you do try to pack it. I've gotten a hold of things like that. Man alive, you can manage it for a short distance, but then you've got to put the thing down. That's exactly what God means. Though all the nations of the world be gathered together against thee, I will break them to pieces. Oh, but Brother Jackson, this is a modern world. Brother Jackson, do you believe our men is that stupid? I believe a lot of them are. And I believe they're going to get involved. And they're going to want to show their expertise and how they can handle their political manipulations. But as they get closer to the time for God to break and tear and rip that thing to pieces. Finally, the Arabs, I have to say, they're going to handle that cup the last time, and they're going to set it down. And then the diplomatic representatives of the United Nations are going to lift that terrible thing and try to carry it. And they're going to suddenly become humiliated and ashamed. Because I believe, brothers and sisters, that the God of heaven has a way of coming down and intervening in the hearts of political men. And God only knows what he means when he says, I'll break them to pieces. You know, it's going to be interesting to see what happens to the United Nations. Look how strong it's been for the last 50 years. They were the beginning of, we will say, agreement of nations to end all wars, and God only knows. The lives of innocent men that have been set off to carry out some of the plans of the United Nations that died for our politicians' cause. Politicians are going to give an answer to God one of these days. Let us get back to this. Yes, here comes the animals for sacrifice. And I will glorify the house of my glory. That's the temple. Now, brothers and sisters, at that same time, there comes then another element of the Jew, they will say the Israeli government, knowing what the temple is for, then they're going to want to rebuild the old city, beautify it, because they know that their Messiah is coming soon. Verse 8, who are these that fly as the cloud and as the doves to their windows? Now the prophet Isaiah, in all possibility, he was allowed to see airplanes coming, landing, coming, landing, coming, landing. How would he describe it? The only thing he could say, what is this? Who is this? Like doves coming to the window. They're bringing supplies. They're bringing wealth. Surely the isles shall wait for me, and the ships of Tarshish first, to bring thy sons from far, their silver and their gold with them. And brothers and sisters, you may not know it, but that verse right there is already an application. As I was talking to the lady the other day, she was saying, Brother Jackson, right now ships are docking at Haifa. And they're bringing Jews that are making their way out of different nations. And they're coming to some of the southern ports of Europe. And here's where they get on these ships. And here's where they're making their way. That is already in the making. So I have to say, brothers and sisters, that all the rest of it is not too far off either. All right. Their silver and their gold with them, unto the name of the Lord thy God, and to the Holy One of Israel, because he hath glorified thee. Once this hour of time comes, and God starts letting Israel rebuild itself, getting itself ready. And now, here's the part I like. That's why I have to say, brothers and sisters, just imagine the youth the world over. Picture yourself, brothers and sisters, taking a look at in the Oriental world, in the Hindu realm, in the Buddha realm, whether it's Burma, India, Thailand, Tibet, China, wherever. Just imagine right now what the state of mentality is. They do not see this. But let them see that era of the miraculous hand of God in Israel's behalf. When they watch that, do you think that they're just going to sit there smug? No. I have to say, brothers and sisters, God's got a way of showing His power and His miraculous presence. It's going to speak to them young hearts. It doesn't matter if he's a Buddha, Hindu, or what. I can see young men going to their institutions learning to be an engineer of some sort, construction engineers and everything. When they look through the TV and they see this going on in Israel, they're not going to be Buddhists any longer. They're not going to be Hindus any longer. I can see these young men, professional in their learning. It's going to create such an enthusiasm in them. And the sons of strangers. Now, this is not some old decrepit man from China come, I want to help you build your temple. How many understand what I mean by my illustration? Sons, it's got to be young men that's got the stamina, the ability, the want to, the eagerness, the enthusiasm. Keep in mind, in the book of Kings, when you read how the first temple that was built by King Solomon went together, out of Lebanon, out of the different nations around Israel in that hour, came your professional tradesmen to help construct the parts, the stone, the wood, whatever was used. It was shaped, cut in the different areas so that when it was brought together, these laborers, they're looking at a chart, and this temple began to go together, and there was not the sound of a saw nor a hammer. Everything fit precisely. All because if they had professional men then that knew how these items were to be cut and shaped for such a masterpiece, can't you visualize it in this day? And I have to say, brothers and sisters, since the whole human race, God created it. This is a temple that's going to be built for the King of Kings and the Lord of Glory to sit in for 1,000 years. And all nations, sooner or later, will make their way to Zion just to worship Him as He sits in that temple. So it's of necessity that God shares the responsibility of the building, the construction of this, by using, we will say, young men, professionals from different areas of the earth. They will come. It's not only building the temple, but it's also rebuilding the city of Jerusalem. And when you get that many brothers and sisters of professional tradesmen knowing what they're doing, that's why, brothers and sisters, for a short era of time there, leading right into the beginning of the week of Daniel, and then the two prophets come on the scene. They run parallel. Keep in mind when the second temple was being made. Read the book of Haggai. He was one of the prophets. Haggai and Zechariah were the two prophets that ministered to those people that helped to construct that second temple. So you can say that no doubt is how the end time picture begins to accumulate. And by the time, brothers and sisters, the thing's in process, here comes the two prophets on the scene, and the thing goes right on into the week of Daniel. Now let me go ahead and read here real fast and we'll finish this. Yes, the sons of strangers. Why is it called that? Because this is in reference, brothers and sisters, to nations. That in ancient time when Israel was a nation, these nations, like in the Orient, never had carried on diplomatic relationships with Israel. So they are strangers in that sense of the word. So the sons of strangers shall build up thy walls, and their kings shall minister unto thee. Yes, from those governments. There's substance, there's material things that God will want. Now, For in my wrath I smote thee, but in my favor have I had mercy on thee. That's a beautiful climax. Therefore thy gates shall be open continually. They shall not be shut day nor night, that men may bring unto thee the forces. Now this is not military forces. This is material substance of the Gentiles, and that their kings may be brought. Listen to this. This is why I have to say, brothers and sisters, this agenda that United Nations have got right now, yes, it's a powerful thing. It's a very influential thing. It's got weight behind it. But as God begins to take over the scene and begins to turn things around to create this picture, imagine nations belonging to UN, and brothers and sisters, right now UN don't even devise such an attitude. You couldn't even get a penny out of the United Nations to contribute to such a building program in any nation. That's the way we've got to look at it when we read this. So when we read this here, for the nation and the kingdom that will not serve thee, once this miraculous is done, they shall perish. Yea, those nations shall be utterly wasted, bankrupt. That goes to show, brothers and sisters, there is in front of us an era of time. Once this negative is beginning to be dealt with, God will turn certain things around to create a worldwide revival, not at all, but to create and change an element of society to serve His purpose. The rest can go. Now then, for the nation and the kingdom that will not serve thee, He will waste them. Now then, the glory of Lebanon shall come unto thee, the fir tree, the pine tree, and the box together, to beautify the place of my sanctuary. That's His temple. And I will make the place of my feet glorious. That's the temple. The sons also, oh my land, I see those skinheads of Europe. We got them coming into America too. The sons also, them that afflicted thee, shall come bending unto thee. Oh, them poor human beings with their heads all skinned up and shaped up like that. Just imagine, brothers and sisters, that kind of people happen to say, I ask forgiveness. Be like that bunch of boys sitting there at that table drinking their beer and making fun of me, and that other little fellow, and that colonel, that corporal did what he did. When God gets through with things, brothers and sisters, He can change it right now. Yes, when we see the substance here mentioned, the sons of them that afflicted thee shall come bending unto thee, and all they that despise thee shall bow themselves down at the soles of thy feet, and they shall call thee the city of the Lord, the Zion of the Holy One of Israel. Now then, coming on down through here, it tells you more of what's to be unfolded and done to accomplish this beautiful thing. Does that stop the Antichrist? No. Because the Antichrist still comes on the scene. And everything goes into the week of Daniel. And that's why the two prophets, they have to come on the scene also. But my main point is the temple becomes built. The city is built. And yes, it's true. And the two prophets, for 3.5 years, I have to say they smite the land with drought, judgments, plagues of every nature. Why? Because you still got that political spirit in Israel that signs up with the Antichrist. So that's God's way of showing His displeasure by sending these prophets. And then the last half of that week is the time of the Antichrist, because he kills the two prophets. That makes the man of sin think that he's got everything in his control. But God only allows him 3.5 years. And then, brothers and sisters, He sets things in motion that changes the whole picture. Now let me go back to Ezekiel 38, and we will close. Let's notice how Ezekiel 38 is worded. That's why I have to say, you don't just see the picture in reading the whole concept of 38. It addresses the land of Magog. That's Russia. Gog, that's the ruler. But it tells you, when will this be? It said, in that day, thou shalt think an evil thought, and thou shalt come down into the land that's been brought back from the sword, meaning captivity and dispersion. When my people Israel dwells safely. Well, for the last 50 years, Israel has not dwelt safely. She's constantly been fighting wars, skirmishes, skirmishes. Who was it? It was the Arab world, under this Islamic spirit of hatred, wanted to annihilate the Jew. Get rid of them. Get them back out of here. They don't belong here. So, brothers and sisters, for 50 years, the Arab has stood at her shoulder, terrorizing, victimizing the Israeli people. But when God then does open up the scene and changes the whole spectrum of things, and He shows His miraculous power, so that Israel can be now restored or rebuilt according to the chapter that I've just read. And to think that the Islamic world, the Arabs from out of Jordan, Saudi Arabia, here they come contributing. Even the 19th chapter of Isaiah, where she has conquered Egypt, it says, in that day 5 cities in the land of Egypt shall want to speak the language of Canaan. Now, brothers and sisters, that's got to show. Even God, when He shakes His hand over Egypt, and Israel is used to do these things, this Egyptian society suddenly changes. Then because there's a distance between Jerusalem, where the temple and things are at, then the Egyptian people are wanting to say, let's build an altar in the middle of Egypt. So when we see this era of the miraculous, it's God's way of giving Israel peace. All of her cousins, Syria, Egypt, Jordan, Saudi Arabia, all of them are now at peace with Israel. No more comes a Hezbollah. No more comes a terrorist. In fact, all these people are working in collaboration with Israel to get accomplished. That's why, brothers and sisters, Israel will be dwelling safely in that hour. But oh, look over in Iran. Look all in these other places where the Muslims are at. Did you know 60% of southern Russia is all Islamic people? I can just see them begin to sweat with antagonism. Oh, let us have a chance at them. Look at old Muammar Gaddafi of Libya. Look at the Ethiopians, still steaming with hatred. Let us have a chance. Read the lineup in Ezekiel 38. There's Ethiopia, there's Libya, there's Persia, which is Iran. Basically, brothers and sisters, it's not many troops out of Russia, it's the technicians and the designers. And I have to feel like, brothers and sisters, Russia will have somewhere a secret place of rendezvous, of training and getting ready for this attack. And when you read it, brothers and sisters, knowing Israel's position and high equipment of technology and we will say satellite information, it would be utterly impossible for Russia to bring a land convoy of troops and military equipment down any highway, whether it's through Turkey or through Syria. It would be impossible. She would meet them and devastate them before they got there. This has got to be a secret approach designed by Russia's technicians. It'll be one of the largest airdrops of paratroopers that's ever been known in the history of warfare. Because first off, brothers and sisters, the idea is have this place close enough that within at least an hour's time they can be over the land at a certain strategic time and put the drop there. Did it not say in Ezekiel 30, and thou shalt cover the land like a cloud? You know what? God's still the God of the miraculous. Because then God says, I will think an evil thought. When fury comes up in God's face and he gets mad, all of these troops, I have to believe God's going to send a storm so devastating, he's going to blow these from here to yon. And there will be a shaking in the land, even as much as the fish of the sea. They have to feel the effects of it. It happens at a time, brothers and sisters, when Israel is not expecting such a thing. And it absolutely shocks the world to see such a thing take place. And don't forget, when you read it, read the entire contents. God's going to cause a devastating fire and brimstone to fall on Russia, and I have to say, he is going to devastate that homeland of Russia to such a point. Her society that's left is going to take a long time for her to recover from that devastating blow that God rains on Russia. I'll never forget back there a few short years ago when we was in Russia. Now, I'm not a professional on Russia. We was only there one time. But everywhere you walked, you hardly walk the streets of Moscow. Somebody's carrying a book. It's not the Bible. They're constantly going to school, learning, 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 learning. And yet, brothers and sisters, in the past number of years, how I have heard their economy is the poorest. Their people are living on the bare necessities, and they're still learning. Learning. That's why you hear me say things like I do. What good's all this learning going to do if eventually it don't bring you into an era of time when you can have peace of mind and happiness in your heart? And when you see them Russian people walk the streets, here goes this man, he passes that man, they don't even speak. You wonder what's wrong with these people. They lived under communism so long, they distrusted one another, they told on one another, they lied on one another, and then when that communistic spirit was broken down, the people still distrusted because their whole concept thinks like that. I have to say, somewhere, brothers and sisters, there's a spirit there in that land. God sees it. It's not for me to determine their end. That's for the Lord. But there's a reason why they harbored this atheistic spirit. And that seems to be what they're studying. So may God help us. Heavenly Father, I pray tonight, take these words, Lord. Use them as you see fit. Help us, Lord, in this hour we live. And Lord, I pray for our own nation. Seeing the political situation as it is tonight, God, may you hasten the hour of time when, Lord, you too will turn things around. And Lord, you will set back in motion the things that would cause this nation to be changed from darkness to light. And Lord, that leadership begins to change the whole effect of all of this. And Lord, we believe that somehow or other you've got a purpose in what you're going to deal in this nation. So we pray for Israel tonight. God bless those people that hunger and thirst for to see your hand at work in their behalf. I ask this, Lord, tonight in Jesus Christ's name. Amen. May the Lord bless every one of you. It is.